Good morning. It's going to be a terrific, wonderful, and crazy day. We have outstanding panelists, guest speakers, experts coming in today, already here. We are having a focus today on, not just limited to it, but a focus on retail, office, and industrial. Hotel is coming in as well 2 times today. So we have a very, very wide spread in this session. I saw that in preparation for the class, a textbook, multiple chapters, and if you read the bios for the speakers today, years, decades of experience in various setups. And I would like to start today with introduction of Andrew Remick, who is on my advisory board. Then would like to introduce Bill Rotella and his son Chris Rotella. Chris is actually an MSRED alumni, same as Andrew. And in transit right now is also Gloria Fernandez from HP Capital, advisory board member, and one of her associates, Aldo. I'll be doing an introduction, very brief, very informal today, to save time. And it's so much material, I would spend an hour to read everything, and you have prepared for that already, to make this really short today. Very short, would like to point out, Andrew Remick was the vice president at Crack. You just recently transformed into Crack Capital.
Well, we transformed into Crack Capital, and then I recently left again, and now I'm a partner at Highland Real Estate Capital.
So that was happening in the last 6 weeks. So the bio is not updated yet. One important thing what I would like to point out here is Andrew works closely, or used to work closely at Crack Management, leasing construction teams to underwrite acquisition opportunities, develop a business plan for the applicable value add strategy, oversee the execution of the business plan, and the disposition of or recapitalization of assets. So that's part of the presentation he's giving us today. That's his expertise. To make this really short and very informal, we talked prior to the session, William or Bill Rotella is a 39-year plus industry veteran and is president and founder of the Rotella Group. And I really shortened this extremely down to Bill and the firm represent national retail tenants as well as landlords and property owners throughout South Florida with their specific real estate requirements, including acquisition and dispositions needs. Just to name a few: Home Depot, Sportsbook, acquisition of the former Sports Authority in Jupiter, PGA Superstores. The Rotella Group is a founding member of the X-Team Retail Advisors Network. You might want to explain that to us a little bit. A national commercial brokerage network of real estate specialists established in 2002 and consisting of 40 real estate firms with 300 associates throughout the US and Canada. Bill is joined in the firm by his sons Christopher and Michael, who Chris is available today as well. And I found it really, really wonderful when I invited actually Chris. He's like, hey, maybe I'll bring my dad. So Bill, thank you very much for your time. Chris, thank you for the great idea to bring your dad along and add decades of experience to this environment. Chris Rotella joined the firm in 2012. He represents clients including Subway, Dunkin' Donuts, Yoga Joint, Dutch Pot, and Blyer Bolts. Chris began his commercial real estate career with Liberty Universal Management, handling third-party leasing in the Orlando, Florida market. During his leisure time, Chris enjoys yoga, scuba diving, boating, sporting events, and flying. And he is a proud member of our alumni. So that all said, very short introductions here. We have kind of the idea right now that Andrew is going first, small PowerPoint to warm you up into the topic. Don't be shy about questions. I want everyone in here that they are going to ask you questions as well. So this is extremely interactive. Stay hydrated, don't fall asleep, particularly at 3 p.m. It's going to be fun. I'm really excited about this setup of that expertise in the room. That all said, guys, fire away. Thank you very much for being here today.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. Usually in this class I go through a PowerPoint that's sort of A to Z, how we underwrote it, what happened, and then the actual returns. This is an actual property that's on the market now, so I wanted to sort of go back and forth and get your thoughts on how you would underwrite it, how you would look at the boxes, how you would look at the market, and such. So we get the package, we underwrite it.
Ah, it's your laptop. Not the case in the other one. You can have it.
So this is Century Plaza. It's a Ross, DD's, Aldi, and Big Lots anchored shopping center with a small little strip in the front. It's 100% leased, 132,000 feet, built in 1973, but renovated in 2008. Parking 4.3 per thousand, which on retail is usually required somewhere between about 4 minimum. If you guys don't know the Orlando market, here's downtown over here, and Disney's over here, along with Universal. Winter Park is up here, and this is located just south of Winter Park on the east side of Orlando. Here's the site plan. As you can see, there's the Aldi, the DD's, the Ross. Just for a quick overview real quick, Aldi's 24,000 feet. They're currently paying $11.50. They expire in June of 2028. It's important to note that they just took 2 options simultaneously and at the same time spent $1 million on their renovation. They had 3 options or 3 5-year options left, and they've been here since 2008. DD's is a newer lease in the shopping center. They're currently about 23,000 feet, paying $7 bucks a foot. They expire in 2025 with 4 5-year options. And sales here are good for DD's. They're doing about $7.4 million. Shoeland's 9,000 feet, paying $13.75. They expired this year in June. No options, and they've been here since '98. And Ross. So Ross is on a former J. Byron's lease. They acquired the lease when they went bankrupt. 43,000 feet. They're only paying $326 a foot. Their lease expires in 2023, and it's important to note that they only have 1 5-year option left, and that's it. They've been a tenant since 1983. Sales here are $12 million. Sales for a good Ross would be around 9. So they're doing very well. And then Big Lots. Big Lots is 25,000 feet. They're paying $13.75. They expire in the next 2 years, and they have no options. They've been a tenant here since 1993, and they do about $3.2 million, which is good for a Big Lots. I think I pointed out some of the higher level what's my thoughts. So there's one below market anchor rents. Ross is only paying $3 and change. You have Ross, you have DD's at 7, and not only that, but there's an extremely dense trade area. It's about 160,000 within a 10-minute drive. Retail market here, it's along Cimarron Boulevard. It's where all of the retailers are, and if you're a big box in this market, it's where you want to be. Visibility, this is a very clear site as you're driving along Cimarron. The Ross and the DD's and the Aldi are extremely visible, and then addition to that, as we're looking at it, we always look at, do we have to assume they're a debt or not? This was being held free and clear. So important facts that we've found out through the broker. So Century Plaza is owned by an absentee REIT, and what you find is a lot of these REITs own so many properties that they end up sort of not paying attention to the not best of the best. And this is what's happened here. You have a stable tenant history with 8 of the tenants having been here on average about 19 years. I think one of the most important facts was the property was brought to the market based on the assumption that Big Lots was vacated. And then in addition to that, Shoeland was also vacated. As I said before, Ross acquired their current lease from Jay Byron's, and their current lease is about 46,000 feet. They like to be in the mid-30s, so technically they would love to give up about 10,000 feet. And then as we started to dig, we realized Big Lots was moving not because they didn't want to be here, but because they wanted more feet. So they would love to have an additional about 10,000 feet. Market, here's the market. As you can see here, Cimarron Boulevard here, all of the retailers are either along this road or just to the west on Conway. So wanted to get your guys' thoughts, what's the next questions, assuming market rents are correct, assuming physical plans correct, how would you guys look at this deal?
Can we see the physical layout one more time?
Yeah.
I would look at the revenue per square foot and kind of see what kind of condition and what the trend was with that, just to kind of see how each specific retailers are making money per square foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important note. In a lot of these leases, they require to give sales. So we know Ross, we know D's, and we know Big Lots. All these are private company. We do know that they just spent $1 million on the store renovation, so I think that's a good hint.
Did you say that Big Lots was looking to
Expand.
expand? Okay, so I guess the big question, if you're looking at it, would be, do you have the room in your site to give them the extra 10,000 square feet? And then I would also be interested in just understanding more of the available power within the demographics of who's going to actually shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm also purchasing it because it's a REIT that hasn't really paid much attention to it, I would be intrigued to know what's not been addressed in the center, whether it's maintenance, whether it's a roof issue, because that's greatly going to determine your costs going into it. That's going to determine who you have to bump. And then I would try and see if you guys can get talking to Ross to see what their inclination is on paying more rent, because that's ridiculously low, and that can help offset the cost of going into that center.
I have a question about so where you got a shadow there behind Big Lots, is that just overhang or?
That's just extra space that's sort of their docking area.
The docking area?
Yeah.
I noticed on the site plan there was a piece of land behind the property. Is there a reason why that's
This
not
right here?
developed? Yeah.
That's wetlands, so that we can't touch.
Did you discuss the area market rents, the current market rents?
I did not, we don't have time to go through all the rents, but so assume for a second that all the rents are at market.
Or
Yeah. Or I should say,
'Cause
all of the shop space are at market, the big box are below market.
You know if there's percentage rents included with these? Are they making money off of the sales that these stores are doing?
There are not.
Are not.
You said that a lot of the REITs don't really pay attention to their properties just because they have so many. How do you create the relationship with the REITs to get the property?
It's more about the REITs bring the property to market through brokers.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, because they're a big institution, they won't sell off on a single asset deal as a direct relationship. We've bought in a few properties lately from like DDR, and those properties always go through an individual who's sort of the middleman. So the HFF, the shopping center groups, the Cushmans and the Colliers and such. So these are all great questions, and these are sort of my thoughts. So Shoeland, why are they leasing? How do you backfill that space? So if you look at the site plan, it's a really narrow space, right? So probably have only 30, 40 feet of frontage with just a big long bowling alley. So how do you refill that space? And our thoughts were, one, if they're only paying $13 now, why can't we just chop this space in half? So that way it's not so deep, and then you increase your other rent by, call it to $25. So that was one of our thoughts. Two, if Big Lots leaves, what are the co-tenancy restrictions from allowing you to do new deals in that space? Can you do a gym? Can you do another grocer? Can you do another soft goods retailer? Can you do another discount retailer? Is there a way to market the Ross rent? So we know that they're in a oversized space that they would like 10,000 feet less. You know that Ross likes term and they want to be here. So can you give them term since that they only have one 5-year option left, so that they know in the next 20 years that they're not going to have to worry about this store. And what I forgot to mention was across the street there's a vacant Kmart that's been vacant for years. They've been trying to lease it. And a quick backstory on that is, the owner's in it for so much that they're probably not going to lease it anytime soon. We know a few retailers who have also looked at this site, who have at the Century site, who have also looked at that site, and they just can't make it work. But more importantly for the retailers, the ingress and egress out of that site is just really, really bad.
So the dividing wall between Big Lots and Ross is structural?
So that's sort of the biggest question, right? So I think is what you're getting at is, can you decrease the Ross? Can you increase the Big Lots? Because if you look there, they're right next door, right? So why can't you just demo this wall, build a new wall here, you expand Big Lots, you increase the Ross rent, and you give them term? Now you've created sort of a whole new center with tenancies that are probably going to stick for many, many years to come.
Is that the easier way to do it? Would you not try to maybe just switch their locations and just have the Ross move to the Big Lots and the Big Lots move where the Ross is?
It sounds easy, but it's actually a lot more trickier than it is, because then
sure.
you have to move all of their furniture and fixtures and product. And I think one of the biggest things is, even though Ross would love to be smaller, they're like, but happens if, and if people don't come to the store during the remodel, so they're kind of worried about all of that stuff as well.
Well, with not having a percentage rent and that low per square foot, it seems like, just eyeballing it, you'd be able to push that in, because I don't think another landlord would cut that deal.
And then I think one of the biggest risks is what happens with big lots, right? If big lots were to leave, you have a ton of restrictions from Aldi, you have a ton of restrictions from DDs. The good thing is that the Ross lease is a J. Byron's lease from '83, I think, so it's a very friendly lease on the landlord side, so we're able to do a lot more than we usually would if it was a brand new Ross deal. So we, as of right now, we've gone to the code tenancy. We can't do a gym, we can't do a grocer, we can't do another discounter. We can do some soft goods, so that kind of limits it very, very much. And then on top of that, you sit behind this out parcel and the value pond. So, so as a new tenant, kind of want to be behind these two tenants, not have great visibility.
If they leave, could you divide them and make them small retail spaces, since you don't have a lot of retail?
Yeah.
Like smaller?
Yeah, I mean, you can, but your smaller shops around here, I mean, I usually like to keep the smaller base here and keep the less amount here.
Okay.
Just because, I mean, you can, but the thing is too, is that you be chopping this probably in a third.
Right.
So that goes from, call it 10,000 feet, and even if you got $20 a foot there, you're sort of not making up that rent of what somebody else would pay. And then on top of that, you're probably gonna spend another $60 a foot just to, or probably more than that, just to do new storefronts and everything else.
Why don't you try to keep big lots on there, and I don't know if it's structurally sound, but if you put a second floor on top and off from the second floor and put shoe lane as a stairwell and elevator for a second story.
So as we were digging through, and you would think that the prior owner would, before they went to market, would easily call up Ross, call up Big Lots, hey, I have extra room, and Ross wants to downsize, so let's try and make something happen. As we were doing our phone calls, calling the Rosses, calling the tenant rep brokers, we found out that nobody ever called Ross. Nobody ever called DDs. We called around and found out that the Big Lots deal that was going on down the street wasn't happening. So as we were bidding on this thing, nobody else knew what was happening. And then on top of that, we also found out from Shoeland that they didn't want to leave. The current owner was sort of trying to stick it to them because the owner was had a really bad accident. He wasn't able to speak or talk for the past 6 months, so they were just going to kick him out. So after speaking with their broker, we figured, okay, we'll keep Shoeland, and if we were to buy this thing, we'll continue to speak to Ross, and we'll continue to speak to Big Lots, and hopefully we can make it happen, because now we know that Big Lots is forced to almost make a deal because their other deal blew up and there's no other boxes in this area. So I guess, tell you what, based on those facts, who would buy it, who would not buy it? Assuming all the numbers worked out. But you have risk with the Ross and the DDs, and not with DDs, with Big Lots. Right? So this is what happened. So we closed on this, my partner and I, we closed on Thursday. We bought the center for 12 1/4. It was about an 8.34 going in. What's interesting is that was our underwriting cap rate, I think the market, because they were assuming Big Lots and Shoe Land was vacating, the rest of the market saw this as a 7.9 cap because they were underwriting all that rent not there. We see this as a 5 to 7 year hold. We underwrote it to like a mid to high teens IRR. I think what's important on this deal is that it's more of a cash on cash generator. So we'll average probably low teens. We're currently in discussions with Shoe Land to renew. They should be signing their renewal probably in the next week or so. When we're out in Vegas next month, we have meetings with Ross. We're currently in discussions with them to downsize, and then we're in discussions with Big Lots to renew but take the additional fee that Ross is going to give up.
Can you kind of go into some of the assumptions that got you to that 8.3 number? All the other bidders were kind of closer to, we said 7.9 on the value.
Yeah.
That's just the current rents now, right?
Yeah, so it's the current rents now, but the difference is that most, I would say 99% of the other buyers had no income on the Big Lots and they had no income on the Shoe Land, which brought it down to the 7.9, because if you know that they're vacating, you're not going to underwrite it.
Can you shift the Ross into the Shoe Land space, and then you'll have 20,000 square feet extra because they want to have 10,000 less, and then move Big Lots over, and then recapture the end cap and put a Dollar Tree because you'll have 10,000 square feet right there?
We thought about that, but Ross was one side only. We don't want to start doing construction on this side, then move over, and then have to start on this side. But not only that, but their storefront is over here. So Jack G at Ross was very specific in saying, if you move this over here, you're also going to have to move our storefront from here to here, which that cost was huge. So it just didn't make sense, but we did think about it.
Could you just go one slide back? Maybe that's this way. We talked about the below market anchors, rents. In regards to that, when you're renewing Ross, are you going to be obviously, putting the square footage up, and is it going to be comparable to the others?
Yes. So to one of the conditions of Ross wants two things. They want less square footage, and they want term, because they know after their current option they have one more left. So in total they'll have 8 to 10 years left. And if we sell this thing and a new landlord comes in, once at the end of Ross's term, they could vacate them and fill them with somebody else. So they would rather now, from our discussions with Ross, is they're really focused on extending time. So they want to be comfortable knowing that they're going to be here for the next, call it 20 years.
How did you make a decision to focus on retail as opposed to the many various real estate products that's out there? Like, so you graduated from this program, and then you were always passionate about retail. What made you focus on retail?
I'll go back to when I started at Crack. So Crack focuses on two things, right? So they have their bread and butter, which is their third party side, which is really management and leasing. They're really retail centric. That's really what they're known for. And on the other side was my side on the acquisitions. We focused on really office and retail. We tried to do multifamily and some in industrial, but it was just way too hard. So over the years, I would say I've personally been involved with probably 65% retail and 35% office. I personally like retail more. I feel like in office, I'm just building to the returns that I ultimately want, especially given on the cash flows, because you're always sort of chasing NOI, meaning that someone's always leaving. You're constantly spending TI and LC to bring in the next guy, and that guy's always leaving every 5 or 6 years, whereas on these retail deals, Ross stays for 15, 20 years. Any other questions on this?
Any other questions, guys?
You had just mentioned that industrial was too hard, like what do you mean, what was too hard about it? Did the numbers not work, is that what it is?
It was just not something with our appetite as far as capital, right? So if you look at what's been trading, it's trading in the high 4s, low 5s, and a lot of these industrial REITs are just buying just really, really low cap rates. And we're not an institutional fund, we're friends and family, so we need to get some sort of cash flow on our money. So if we can't hit that, call it 8 to 9% a year, or if we're not getting cash flow, we at least need upside at the end and have a huge pop in IRR or multiple. And on some of these stabilized industrial deals, we're not seeing that. It's a little bit different on the smaller bay stuff, where you're not competing with the institutions, but it's still been really, really hard to buy. People are just paying really low cap rates.
You might just tell them that, you know, that some of these properties, obviously you had to bid on this property. Some of these properties come to the market with no price, so that all the underwriting he's had to do, you know, so everybody's doing the underwriting. Nobody knows where the price is going to go. In the end, you're generally taking your best shot. If there's 10 bidders, they might take the 3 best bids and shortlist those bids and have those guys come back to the table. I don't know if that's what happened to you. Versus some number of properties come to the market with an actual price. So you could just decide if that price, that doesn't mean there might be more bids and that price ends up becoming higher than what actually got put on the market, but at least you got a starting point. The tough part is to take the property like this without a bid. You have no idea who you're competing with when you're starting, but you got to go through this. You got to spend the same time. You got to do the same analysis. And evidently, these guys were a lot more thorough. Made that they had the relationships with the tenants, they had the relationships with the tenant rep brokers, so they were able to dig a little deeper than most guys that were looking at the property and just took everything at the surface. The package that they had, they analyzed it from the package. They didn't do the deep dive into the and do the research on the market, find out that Big Lots wasn't moving. That's really where you find the value, where these guys, where you have the relationships that you can dig a little bit deeper, learn a little something that somebody else didn't learn, have a relationship, or maybe you got the kind of relationship with a real estate director that likes you and says, for you, I'm going to help make this deal happen. Those are all the intangibles that make a huge difference in how a deal can go down.
Yeah, I would say that anytime we've bought anything, the reason we've been the highest bidder is because we knew something that nobody else did, right? So the winning bidder is always that guy who's willing to stretch and overreach, or he knows something that nobody else does. So this tenant will fill this space, or this tenant's going to expand. If you don't know that, we're not willing just to sort of take a shot. We want to know.
And also, just a very quick question, was it also hard to value the property based on the current rents, or did that help you? How did that assist in the valuation of the property with the current?
I mean, that helps because the current rents are what they are, and if there's a lease intact for the next 10 years, we know that that can't be changed. But what we do look at is sort of the embedded NOI, meaning if this guy's below market, maybe in 10 years he'll be at market, so when you're going to market to sell it, you can pitch the value add story. And whereas the stabilized property would have been a 7.5 cap, maybe you could exit at a 7 cap because the next guy's going on the right, a big bump. I mean, fortunately at this property, if it was 100% 98% lease, and the only people we were really making big assumptions for was for the Ross renewal and for the big lots.
And so from beginning to close the other day, how long did this take?
This took, so once it was under contract, we had it under contract for 30-day inspection, 30-day closing. Because it was a bigger REIT, they had some trouble getting all the information to us, so we ended up extending for 2 weeks. So we probably had a 45-day due diligence and a 30-day close. But before that, it was on the market. Between it was on the market and we came to a negotiated price, it was probably on the market for 30 days. And like Bill said, this was a marketed process. They went out to market, probably had, I don't know, 10, 15 bids. Everybody was looking at it, and then what happens is, like you said, is all the offers would come in, then it goes to the best and final round. Well, they'll take the top 3 or top 4, and they'll say, hey, sharpen your pencils. What's your the best bid?
And he had mentioned a relationship. Did you have previous relationships with Big Lots and Ross or representatives from them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that helps is us being able to either call the tenant reps, like the Rotella group, and say, hey guys, what do you think about here? Would your tenant want to stay? Would they want to come here? How much would they pay? Those relationships always help underwriting of the deal.
So, like this center, are you guys targeting like commodity centers because they are easy to leverage up and then like hold value through the coming downward cycle? Is that the strategy?
I think strategy's sort of twofold. It's one, location. I think the biggest thing is buying centers that are well located, because if and when there is a downturn, we don't want to be in a tertiary market on the worst corner, or even in a great market, but on a site that should have never been built. So one is we look at things location-wise, and I think the idea of what happens with retail and the internet, I don't think it's as big as what the news is projecting it to be. Maybe a lot of this, so the high end's doing really good and the low end's doing really good. Some of the stuff in the middle is doing all right. What I like about this center is that while it's not on the low end, it is a discount center.
Yeah.
So your Ross and your TJ Maxx's and your DD's and your Aldi's and your Home Goods and all that are doing really, really, really well. So this is what sort of drew us here is, you know what, this is sort of an internet resilience center. And even if we did have somebody else come, you know what, there's enough traffic here that will push people to other parts of the center.
So on the financing piece, you intend to leverage it?
Yeah, so at closing, we did a deal with one of our banks that we've done a few deals with. We ended up getting 65% financing on this.
Andrew, the physical condition of the property, so when you underwrote this, I mean, I assume that the roof and all of the stuff that you could, I mean, it's extremely expensive to replace a roof and to do some things. Was everything relatively good shape?
Yeah, so one of the major things that we always do is we always order a property condition report. And it's one guy, he goes up there and looks at the roof, he looks at the physical plans, he looks at this and that. But so you can't always rely on them, because it's one guy who's just a very general guy and just goes and looks at everything. So one of the additional things that we do is we'll hire our roofer to actually go to the site, walk it, and inspect the roof. We originally underwrote new roof for the smaller retail center. We were lucky enough that we found out that we didn't have to do it. The roof on the larger part where all the big boxes was recently redone, and there's still a 15-year warranty on that, which is good. Some of the other CapEx items that we underwrote, what did we underwrite? We underwrote a seal and stripe for the parking lot. We underwrote paint, we underwrote landscaping, just some miscellaneous items. I think we got lucky here, and there really wasn't any true damage to the physical plant. Everything was in really good condition.
Because you said you do a lot of third-party leasing and property management, and you guys have the strip center right now on Island, when you were out, correct, I guess. Do you guys have on staff a roofer, and kind of maintenance, or maybe an engineer or something like that?
So we have our construction team, but they're more generalist, and they oversee all the construction, but they're not a roofer, and it's not a day porter, and it's not a true handyman. It's someone who's a little bit higher up in the chain, who is really smart, but doesn't get dirty on his hands and knees and checks the roof and everything else. So now, is that correct? We would always hire outside sources.
It might be worth just the last thing telling them the other due diligence stuff you do, the phase one and the various things that you do that kind of leads you to knowing that you don't have problems beyond the physical condition of the property.
Yeah, so one of the things that we as buyers, but also as banks, they always require a phase one, which is just a quick data check of what's happening around there as far as environmental. Has there been any spills? Has there been any leaks? Has there been any dumping? And if they find anything through their records, then they'll recommend a phase two. Phase two is where they go on the ground and they actually check and they sample the water, they sample the soils, they sample everything, and if everything comes back fine, then you're fine. And if the wells are dirty, then they sort of drill more and more and more and more until they find where the source is and where the source stops. Which we've been in situations where we found phase two items, and we sort of dropped the deal because a lot of banks won't finance anything if they find there's environmental hazards, unless you know that there's a plan to remediate everything. Second one we do is we do planning and zoning report that basically says everything's concurrent, your current zoning meets, do the number of parking stalls you have meet, are there any liens on the property? And then there's also a lot of attorney due diligence as far as getting a new survey. The easements, are there any new easements? Are there any old easements? If you look at the center, I'm not disclosed, but there's two shopping centers next to it that you have to drive through to get to the main road. Do you have an easement with those two shopping centers? If they redevelop, are they able to clear the road? Who's responsible for those roads? Are we responsible, or is somebody else, and we just sort of have to pay them a cost of $1,000 every year for the road maintenance and landscaping?
So you mentioned the zoning due diligence. Is that something you order from like a third-party contractor, or is that through the municipality?
That's a third-party contractor that goes through the municipality. So we'll hire them. They'll then call planning and zoning, then they'll call this department, and they'll call this department, and sort of tie everything up together.
Land use attorney?
They can, but usually not. 99.9% of the time we hire sort of outside third-party companies who their sole focus is just this, right? So when we hire, we'll usually hire one group to do a phase one property condition report and the planning and zoning report.
It's like a civil engineer's like firm or something?
Kind of.
Okay.
Andrew, the appraisal from the bank, you're required, so.
And then the appraisal too, one of the big things for the bank is they'll say, we'll do the lesser of 65% of cost or 65% of appraised value. So they'll hire a third-party appraisal company will then give them all the rent rolls, the financial information. They'll come back and they'll give their appraised value. On this one, we were lucky. I believe they came in just above what we were paying for it. And then the other thing to note is on our financing, I just realized is we also got additional dollars for in the case Ross downsized and Big Lots took the additional fee. And that way we weren't coming out of pocket how to build the wall and the leasing commissions and the TI.
You built that all into your pro forma
Yes.
when you submitted it to the bank.
Exactly.
I have a question about your pro forma. We always talk about how we can optimize the learning outcomes here in the program for the students. And we had multiple board meetings where the question comes up, what do you teach in Argus or the DCF? Are you running your pro forma? Is that a special year experience Excel spreadsheet, or are you using specific software that helps you to actually make your job easier?
So what I do is I use Argus solely for cash flows only. I don't put any debt, I don't put a purchase price, I don't put an exit. Cash flows only. I take the cash flow, I dump it into my model. My model then sort of spits everything out. And there within that Excel, I can change cap rate, I can change the exit, I can change the debt, I can change numerous assumptions. Where Argus is good, but as an industry, nobody really likes to use Argus for the whole suite, just really cash flows only. And then for smaller companies, there are third-party companies who will actually export all that data for you and import it into your model. On the older DCF Argus, it was a plug and play where it was one click and they would export all of your data and it would be easily into your model. The new Argus doesn't allow third parties to, I guess, cipher their information. So now you have to sort of send the Argus run to the company, but then they'll send you a model that looks really, really good.
Are these properties made available through an IOM or is it just the MLS?
So these properties are brought to market through the HFS, the Cushmans of the world, and they'll always list these. They'll send out the direct emails, so they know that I'm looking for a retail property, so I'm going to make sure I send it to Andrew Remick. I would say almost never are any of these properties listed on the MLS. Some of the websites that you can view these on, you can look at Crexy, you can look at Real Capital Markets, which is rcm1.com. You have to sign up. And then if you have access to CoStar, they're sometimes listed there as well.
LoopNet for the small
And
properties.
LoopNet too. Yeah. All right. Great. Thank you, guys.
All right, I would like to use that moment to introduce Aldo and Gloria. Hi guys, how are you guys doing? I keep the best for last, so Aldo, you go first. Aldo is an associate in the Miami office of HP Capital, responsible for the acquisition, asset management of real estate assets in the United States and overseeing HP Ventures' international travel platform. Prior to joining HP Capital, Aldo worked as an analyst in the Morgan Stanley Securitization and Asset Monetization Group. And everything else he will tell us about himself today. And then I have the delighted pleasure to have another advisory board member in the room today, Gloria Fernandez. Gloria Fernandez is the Chief Operating Officer for H Capital, a privately held real estate owner, investor, and developer based in Miami, Florida. The firm focuses on the acquisition, asset management, and development of value-add real estate assets in primary and secondary markets in various markets throughout the United States. Previously, Gloria has served as the Managing Director of Asset Management for Indian Partners. Before that, she served as the Senior Vice President for Acquisitions and Finance at Ross Realty Investments. And again, she is a board member of my delighted advisory board. That all said, I know she has some material that she wants to share with you guys today. Aldo is part of her team and agreed to join us. I think he's more curious about what to learn here with you guys. And thank you, Andrew, for that icebreaker and warm-up for this today's session. Again, ask questions at any time. This session is so full of energy and full of expertise. It's not scripted. Yeah? So keep the ball rolling. Gotta poke those guys. Ask them anything about their careers and the facts. Remember, we had a session with Steve where we talked about networking and how to send networking to the next level. You should leave with at least 2 or 3 of their, or if not all of their business cards at the end of the day, okay? That all said, welcome. Thank you very much for coming here. Who would like to have a little bit more focus time right now? Want to go next with presentation, or would you like to open up for a general discussion? Bill?
I'd like to just give you an observation when you say networking. So at the end of the day, the real estate business is all about networking. Everything you heard in the first presentation, we all end up coming together at some point in time. We're not involved in his deal at all, but we may well represent, we may represent a tenant that ends up going into that property. There are so many ways that we stay connected. In our world, I would say that 50, 60, 70% of the deals we do, there's another broker involved, or there's a developer involved. Gloria and I have known each other through each of our careers, and our firm currently does some work for her firm. So 10 or 15 or 20 plus years later, we're all interconnected doing stuff. So the relationships that you guys are building in the room, everybody that you get to meet that comes to the panel, if you're gonna stay in the business and you're gonna stay generally in this market, you're gonna cross paths with the same people all the time. Never burn a bridge. There are a lot of times we all want to burn a bridge. There's some real frustrating moments in the business where somebody doesn't give you the straight scoop, whatever, you end up with a little egg on your face, whatever it might be. You got to suck it up, because you never know that same person a year down the road may well be the person that you make a big fee with, or you do a deal with, you become a partner with. You just don't know where the business is going to lead you. The only thing I can assure you is it's going to lead you back to each other. It's going to lead you back to a lot of us. There are thousands of people in the commercial real estate business in South Florida, but most of us interact at some point in time again. At a real estate conference, in a deal, at a networking event, you're going to see the same people over and over and over. And that's, in every respect, that's what makes the commercial real estate, that's probably the part that's most fun. There's a lot of money to be made, but it's a very, very social business. There's networking events all the time. Most of those networking events come at the end of the day with a cocktail and an hors d'oeuvre and an opportunity just to shake hands and find out what everybody's doing. So you will cross paths with each other. You'll cross paths with us again. So just make that an important part of your session.
Yeah, so to answer your question about how you end up in an industry, like Kyle, for example, we went to high school together, but his friend that worked for Styles basically got him the job. So it's usually your network that will kind of lead you into, I always got into retail because my dad owns a commercial real estate company. I got my undergrad at UCF in real estate and my master's in real estate development from here. I'm still very close friends. My cohort was a lot smaller. We had probably 8 people in my class when I started, so we had built a really, really strong relationship with those guys, and I'm best friends, I think, with 2 or 3 of them now. So,
who were your classmates?
Huh?
Who were your classmates?
So one of my classmates, it was Alex Gulick.
Yeah, Styles.
He should come and speak in here. He's the CFO of Percacci, which is a development company. So we were taking sites that they had across from the Dolphin Mall, and when I was giving a presentation and the teacher would say, oh, you know, I don't think the tenant would pay there, and I was able to say, oh, I just got off the phone with the owner of City Furniture, he said he would pay $13 per foot. So those relationships, you know, do matter. So they actually built a hotel on the site that we, in this class, said they should build a hotel on. So that was kind of cool. We didn't get paid a fee on it, but you know. So doing this though, you're working on real live sites, and you're dealing with things that are happening in them. I mean, he just bought that site this month, a week ago. So you know stuff that other people don't know. And if you had a relationship with somebody, like now we have an idea that he's going up to Vegas in a month to look for a tenant potentially. So we could potentially even still make a fee on that deal, even though it's in the Orlando market. So I'll tell you a little bit about our company, and then you guys can just kind of ask questions on what we do. So, we do site selection work for tenants and for developers and buyers. We do tenant representation, so we represent smaller local companies like the Yoga Joint, all the way up to Dollar Tree. We've done 150 Dollar Trees in the last 11 years. So it's important to represent different tenants for different markets. So when the economy was going down, 2007, when the economy was great, nobody wanted to do a Dollar Tree deal with us, and we were knocking on everybody's door, and everybody wanted, you know, $20, $25 square foot rents. A few years later, when the economy crashed, they were calling and saying, well, can you do the deal at 14? So you want to make sure you have tenants that are for good markets and for bad markets to make sure that you can last. So we do tenant representation. We also do landlord work. So we would work with Andrew, and he would come to us and present those problems and issues and show us, man, we'd like to get this to a 9 cap, and you know, what kind of tenants can we bring to the table, and we'll brainstorm with landlords like that and try and help them find space. As you're out in the market, like the value that we create tenants is that we'll be talking to somebody like Andrew, so that a normal person that's driving by that center sees the shoe guy and Ross and sees that it's fully leased, and they'll just keep driving by the site. The value you bring your tenant is knowing, you know, if we're representing Dollar Tree, that there's a potential for 10,000 square feet to be available in that shopping center, which has other discount, you know, users. So that's like a perfect place to plug in a deal. You create the value when you can bring your tenant a site that has never come to the market. Same thing with like a site to purchase, when you can, like right now we're putting a site with Alex from Procacci, the CFO, because of a relationship in front of somebody, $50 million office building potentially, that has never been to the market, has never been seen by other brokers, there's nobody talking about it. So that's really where you can create your client's value. So we do tenant representation, and then we'll also do disposition work. So we might help Home Depot, you know, in the past my dad's helped Home Depot grow, and you know, they've tried different concepts like Home Depot Expo or things like that that might not have worked. So now we'll do disposition work. We'll help them sublease their spaces to get out of sites. So the whole thing kind of goes full circle. You really want to stay focused on either retail or office or industrial, because all your conversations can kind of turn into other deals. So you want your relationships to be in one world, and you want people when they're hiring somebody to know, like, you know, he mentioned HFF and Cushman, those guys are huge. You know, you want to work your way into that conversation where somebody says, in the Ratel Group, you know, you want them to start putting you on that level, because they know that that's your world and that's all that you do, and that you have those relationships from 20, 30, 40 years in the industry. So some of the tenants that we represented, I brought like a few flyers. These are some of the tenants that we currently represent: Dollar Tree, Home Depot. So for a client like Home Depot, like my dad did the Sunrise deal in Fort Lauderdale, he had to put 15 parcels together because it's such a big tenant. So if somebody knows that you're Home Depot and then they want you to sell their property, they're going to increase the price. So you need to, kind of like how, you know, Walt Disney did, you need to be able to go in there quietly, not let anybody know what you're trying to accomplish, get the properties all under contract. So there's definitely like an art to that takes a lot of time, I guess, to learn. And then, you know, having all these relationships again is when you know that you're trying to relocate a tenant into a market or out of a market, is when you can also, you know, an opportunity. If they say, oh, we're trying to expand, we're going to relocate. Well, now when you're at all these networking events, you know of 10 or 100,000 square foot space that might be available. So we'll do tenant representation, and I have this book that I can pass around. So basically, we'll basically take a tenant. So this is a tour package that I did a few weeks ago for a company called the Yoga Joint, which is local here. They have a site right up the street here on 595. But basically, you'll go into a market and they'll give you their demographics and they'll say, you know, we found that we're successful in this many male and female, this type of household income, this demographic population density, and you'll try and match that kind of site. So, and then also taking into consideration their budget. So we'll need 5,000 square feet. We can only afford to pay $120,000, and we want to be in the best shopping center possible. So, you know, it's sometimes hard to do, but the more relationships you have, the more creative you can get. Like we're backfilling Payless and understanding the market and knowing what tenants are struggling. Like right now, the Payless is just all went bankrupt, so everybody's fighting over those boxes right now because there's not a lot of vacancy in the market. So understanding what is going on with other tenants is how you're going to create your tenants' opportunities. So we'll go and tour them in the market using that book and using our relationships with other tenants. And then from there we'll negotiate and help them negotiate, go through the LOIs, and usually once it gets to the lease we kind of hand it off to the attorneys. So we'll do tenant representation work. These are some of our listings that we have.
Quick question. So, what is the common way? Are you seeking tenants? Are you kind of like seeking new tenants and reach out to them, or is it based on your experience in the establishment in the market as a firm? Now the case that tenants are actually coming to you, or potential firms as tenants coming to you. Has there been a change in that pattern?
So the bigger and better you are, the more tenants are going to come knocking on your door. And ideally, obviously, you want somebody to be referred to you because that's the best way. So this is probably a good time to kind of bring up like the X team, for example. So my dad worked for REE for 20 years, and then when he started our company, he was missing kind of like that network, the relationships, the team building, and the knowledge of what's kind of going on across the country. So him and a few guys that used to work for CBRE guys, started this group called the X team. So basically it's 36 offices in over 40 of the major markets throughout the US. So we have Tampa, Jacksonville, we have New York, Texas. So basically that network kind of will help build those relationships potentially. You know, you definitely are knocking on doors, you're definitely asking for the order. You know, there's a lot of people in this business that are good at their job, so, but typically if you can get your hand on a good client, you can perform, they'll stick with you. I mean, we've had Dollar Tree for the last 12 years and have opened pretty much any Dollar Tree you guys have been in South Florida we've put there. So the X team definitely helps us to, these are the different offices that we have for the X team. So we represent all of South Florida. So if, you know, there's a company in Georgia that says we're ready to expand in South Florida, well typically I hopefully get the referral from our X team group. But when we go to these conferences, it's the same thing. We're trying to get, you know, that tenant representation account, and the better tenants you have, you know, the better chance you have of doing that. But you also can only do one of, you know, so if we're doing McDonald's work, we can't do Burger King's work because Burger King doesn't want McDonald's. They don't want you to know all their secrets, obviously. So then these are some of our listings on the landlord representation side, and it's nice when you do both and you wear both hats because then you get more information and you kind of know what's going on in the market, and that's how you can create your tenant's value because you're doing a lot of landlord stuff. By doing landlord stuff, it can turn into tenant representation stuff. I was representing Kimco when I first got into the business, represented a property at Commercial University, and I had this out parcel where I built a relationship with Dutch Pot, which is a Jamaican restaurant here in town. And then that turned into doing the one deal on the landlord side. They called me 6 months later because they felt that I was like honest and credible and I was protecting them even though they weren't my client at that time, to do their tenant representation work. And now we're doing development for them, and we actually have the first property that we built them on the market and about to go under contract. So I kind of used the experiences that I had here in my master's program to be able to say like, oh, we can own these sites for them. You know, this program is what gave me the confidence to think that I could do that. You know, and then I brought partners and other people on that really could get it done. but at least this gave me the confidence to think that I could do it, gave me the questions to ask.
What do you like better, the landlord rep or tenant rep?
So it depends, right? If you have a really good shopping center at Main and Main, then you want to do landlord rep because you know that the space is gonna, if it's a fully leased space, and you know as soon as something gets vacated, that it's gonna get filled. You know you have a payday right around the corner, and it's the same confidence when you have an amazing tenant. If you have like this small tenant that has like 1 or 2 locations, it's kind of like, you know, you're really using your relationships and trying to get the deal done. But if you're running around like Dollar Tree like we have, and people know that you have them, I mean, they're calling you and saying, please come to our shopping center. So it all depends on, like, you know, the location. I mean, they're both fun, I guess you could say. But it's fun when you have someone that's closing deals and you have a landlord that's willing to work with you and give TI and make a deal happen.
Let me just speak to the tenant representation piece. So if you're doing an individual transaction on a building, much like the deal that you were shown before, you're analyzing that property. When you get in the car as a tenant rep broker, if you're the tenant rep broker, and you represent Dollar Tree, for instance, and we represent them kind of from Vero Beach to Key West, when you're in the car with them, they expect you to know every corner, whether it's the corner that they're going to go on or what's going on, what's competing with me at the other 3 corners, and where is my competition, and what is going on with the competition. What other opportunities are coming? I mean, what you have to know to be a good tenant rep broker. There's a difference between being a kind of a tenant rep broker as we see it in the industry, and then a tenant that says, I'd like to find a location on Federal Highway between Sunrise and Commercial Boulevard. That's still tenant representation, but the true tenant representation as we see it in the industry, where you're to do 150 deals with a tenant, you have to have remarkable market knowledge. And when those guys are in the car, because your job as a tenant rep broker, your job for almost any piece, unless you're working for yourself, your job is always to make the guy you're working for look good. In our world, if we're doing tenant rep work, then we represent a real estate director, and that real estate director has a boss. So we're in the car with him on the local level. That guy goes back to a boardroom and makes a presentation to people that maybe have never been in the market, or he's making a presentation on a screen like this. And if somebody asks him a question that he can't answer, or they ask him a question, or they happen to know the market, and they know something more than he does because we didn't tell him, and he's embarrassed over that, or he gets egg on his face, you would be as quickly out of the tenant rep business as you are in the tenant rep business. So being thorough and not making a mistake, and you're always going to make some mistake, but I mean, if it's not a blatant mistake, and you go and get it right, but the goal is to make the guys that we're looking for look great to their guys, and those guys to the next guy, and that's how you stay in the game. And at any point in time that you're not available, and in the tenant rep world, they expect that every client is your only client from their perspective, and you're 24/7 for them. The fact that you're entitled to go on vacation is great, but they fully expect, because they've got people that they're answering to, that you're available to them all the time, and then when they need an answer and they're trying to get a deal done, or they're sitting at a board meeting, that you are available. On the landlord side of the business, and we do landlord work for Gloria, the landlord work is much more black and white. You have a shopping center, you have a very specific space that you're trying to lease. You may have a sign in the window, you already know what the tenant mix is, you heard it before, okay, I've got these tenants, if this one tenant goes out, you know, who's going to be the best fit for what we would refer to as tenant in a tenant mix? What makes for the best tenant mix? Who's the customer that's coming to the shopping center, and who's the logical tenant or tenants that would fill that vacant space? You're looking in probably a 3 to 5 mile radius to find out who's missing. We've talked about it in here, kind of a void analysis. So here I've got a vacant space, and who's the missing tenant, or who's the missing category of tenant that is going there. So it's a I think that's an easier place to jump into the business on the landlord side, because you got, again, it's something very black and white. I've given my very specific assignment to fill 2,000 feet or 20,000 feet or 200,000 square feet. So.
Yeah, and tenant side is really where your network comes in too. Because when you're in the car with somebody and they go, oh, what's that? You know, it's okay to say I don't know, but to be able to say like, I'm not 100% sure what's going on right now. Let me call that broker. You know, and then calling him being able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Chris, how's it going? And they're like, oh, I'm in the car with my client. And you're like, oh, okay, but don't tell anybody, but this is what we're thinking about doing. And like, then your client's like, I'm never getting in the car with anybody else, because you're able to get everybody else, everybody on the phone. They respect you, they give you information. So that's how you keep relationships. So this is kind of an example, well, this is an example of a development that we're doing in Fort Lauderdale. It's a new 2J's that's opening on May 4th. So we had ironically, we had done the 2J's deal, and the developer that we had it under contract with dropped the site. And when he dropped it, somebody else came in, snuck in, grabbed the contract, did this deal, and ironically had a relationship with 2J's as well. Did the 2J's, and we got hired to do this leasing of this 2,500 square foot space next to 2J's. So we'll put a marketing flyer together like this. We'll do email blasts to get it out there to our network that we build over time. We'll go cold call the market and take the flyer, go knock on doors, talk to local tenants. So if you're going to go within 5 miles of the site, you're obviously going to ask them if they want to do a relocation. So that's where it kind of also gets tricky, right? Because you do tenant representation, you have all the relationships with the other landlords, and now you're going to steal their tenants for your project. So, you know, you typically would want to pitch it to them as more just giving them kind of the information is what I do, and I'll say, you know, I'm not looking to necessarily steal you, but if you have any friends or know anybody that wants to go into the market, here's the information on a site that's a mile away, new construction, these are the rents, and kind of give them all the details. When you're looking for somebody to do a second location, you might be going 5 to 10, 15 miles out and saying, hey, if you're looking to expand, this kind of would fill your hole perfectly. So obviously, you know, there's a difference between those two things. And then just, you know, the more that you learn about the business and understand investment sales stuff like what he's doing. So what we're trying to do with this site right here, this would have been like a really, honestly, minimal fee on this. This is where the site is right here. So also being able to like put out good marketing material is, you know, going to get you leads, because these things are floating around everywhere. So if somebody sees good marketing material, they might just call you up that and say, hey, we have a listing, would you mind doing it for us, you know? So our office is located right here at Oakland and Federal Highway. This is where the site is. So what we're trying to do right now actually is we have a tenant that was interested in this property. I'm listening to this from my little brother. And we're actually trying to sell him the building. So what would have been a lease on a 2,500 square foot space is now turning into like $5-6 million purchase. So understanding the different ways to do a deal and create your client's value, that was never the intention really, was to lease it then potentially sell it. Now we're going potentially straight to a sale and allowing them to avoid a leasing fee. So that's definitely being able to create your client's value. Let's see what else we have on here.
How did you end up with that idea?
I mean, we're always trying to either sell it or at least it's just kind of part of the, I think, your mindset at that point, you know? If they call and say, oh, well, we want to sell it. You know, somebody else might say, oh, it's only for lease, but at the end of the day, the client's doing this development to make money. So if the numbers are right, you know, somebody's typically always kind of willing to sell it. So this guy that's looking to buy it potentially is going to buy it on his own cash flow, which is kind of crazy, you know, but he knows long term he wants to be there and wants to control the property. So we do landlord representation, and we'll do work for big companies like Kimco, which is a REE, and we'll do small mom and pops or somebody like Andrew who's just kind of starting to build his own portfolio. We do tenant representation. We'll do investment sales. So that might be a shopping center, it might be a single tenant asset, it might be something like the property we just showed you. Property acquisition and disposition, which again is property acquisition might be, some tenants like to lease, some tenants like to buy. So, and then consulting services. So we're a brokerage firm, but we're kind of more of a consulting service. So we're never gonna tell you which site to go with, ever. We're just gonna give you all the information and tell you what our things are, pros and cons are, and what we like about the market and things like that, but we're always gonna let the decision be made by the tenant. So this is kind of our office right here. You got my dad, Steve Miller in our office, does all the Dollar Tree accounts and works on PJ Superstore with my dad. Bill Pace in our office. He does a lot of tenant representation, and we have myself, Ray Walsh. Clint works on all the leasing stuff. I'm sure that's probably who Gloria's working with too. My little brother. And then we have some administrative people in our office. But I mean, your office is kind of made up of everybody in the industry. You know, you can make a fee with anybody. They don't need to be working with you. They don't. You just, you know, I mean, like the deal this $50 million deal came from a camping trip. You know, just talking and saying, well, what can we bring to the table? Well, how can we do a deal? And so that's the cool thing about the industry. You really don't need to be working. You're always kind of working together. So you never. Like I wanted to burn a lot of bridges, and I've probably burned some, but you know, like he said, too, you don't know who's gonna end up where. You know, like I've known Kyle my whole life, and I always thought I'd call him because he'd take me fishing. I never thought maybe now it could turn into, you know, giving each other market insight and making each other look really good to our clients, and probably making each other a lot of money one day. So you really never know who's gonna come and do it. You never know who's married to who. So you really just keep all your doors open. So that's kind of like a little snapshot, at least, on what we do. Yeah.
Question, back to the Home Depot, actually. So you assembled 15 parcels of land. So, and you said you had remained low key in order for them not to hike up the price for for them to sell it to you. So how did you keep that secret? Because a couple years later, when they would come back, they would see a huge Home Depot there. So how did you remain? Or like, what did you say exactly? So
I'll tell you the story, but I'll tell you that I'll also tell you what happens when the cat's out of the bag. So this is a piece of property on Sunrise Boulevard and 4th Avenue, and it was made up of it was a used car lot, some dilapidated apartments. There was a little submarine shop there, but in a Dan Subs, a lot of people are irritated that we ended up moving that away. And there was also a McDonald's on the site. So beyond the assemblage of the property, we had to move McDonald's, so we actually went to another corner and assembled 3 parcels on the other corner. And Home Depot wanted the site so bad that Home Depot went and bought the 3 parcels in the other corner and built McDonald's, the store, from the ground up. When any of these retailers do a deal, everything's about the numbers. The deal that he's doing is about the numbers. Home Depot makes a projection of what they think they can do for sales, so what can we afford to pay ultimately for the dirt. In order to acquire the dirt, they know what the cost of construction of the building is, so they start with a budget. So of the 14 parcels, I would say that several, maybe the first dozen parcels really, I would say that nobody really knew who it was that was doing it. I mean, they were thrilled to sell their property, and almost every property went at a premium. Then there was a church that was across the street from the property, but their parking was on the parcel that we needed for Home Depot. And the church, in every respect, was a pretty poor church. And we went to the church to acquire the parcel, and they said, that's great, but we need something more. What is that something more? Well, ultimately, Home Depot ended up buying them a van for moving people around. There were a couple of intangibles that have been unique to deals that I've done in the past, but the goal at the end of the day was to get this deal done and give people what they wanted. And so some parcels were just real estate parcels that, like any other parcel, somebody was willing to sell. This church didn't want to go anyplace, but they needed some help. The last parcel was a small little strip center, a small little industrial center, and it was occupied by a motorcycle shop, and they had a 10-year lease, and they were paying, I think they were paying $1,500 a month in rent. But they had a lease, and that lease, they were right in the middle of the puzzle, like a monopoly board. They were right in the middle. The guy that owned the parcel was thrilled to sell because he was going to get a premium for selling his parcel. So he agreed to sell to Home Depot. but part of the deal was you gotta get the tenant to go away. So he had to go talk to the tenant. So I think we sold his parcel for $300,000. And ultimately the tenant said, I'm not going anywhere. I have a lease here for the next 9 or 10 years, paying next to nothing. Well, what's it take for you to go away? Well, you go away for $100,000. No, not going away for $100,000. At the end of the day, that tenant that didn't own the property and only had a lease got $750,000 from Home Depot. So, you know, you'll just find over time. I mean, I've seen that happen a time or two, but nothing like that. This guy occupied next to nothing for space, but had control and was in the middle of the puzzle. And I went to Home Depot and said, you're gonna pay them $750,000, which was probably 3 times the fee that we were gonna earn for having spent 2 years doing the deal. And they said, and I think if they had gone to the city of Fort Lauderdale that really wanted to see this happen, they probably could have done something to help mitigate this deal. At the end of the day, Home Depot said, it still fits into, we've been able to buy the rest of these parcels, it still fits in our budget, and we just want to get these guys gone and keep moving forward. They gave them a check for $750,000. And they never owned a piece of property in the deal. So, just to give you a sense of how it goes. So we ended up basically assembling 2 different corners so that McDonald's could move. And then Home Depot did the deal. In that particular Home Depot deal, I've probably done 15 or 20 Home Depot deals over time. And now, as Chris said, we do a lot of disposition work for them. But that ended up being on a relatively small site. And if you happen to know where that site is, they actually have a parking deck there, which is generally pretty unusual. Again, it's expensive to build a parking deck versus surface parking. But it all just worked in their performance at the end of the day, and they kill it at that location.
So I guess this is more of a question on the art side. When you're trying to keep the left from the right, I mean, obviously there's legal mechanisms like an NDA, you know, or something like that. What's the strategy?
In that particular case, you know, I think we probably, the way that Home Depot set it up, Home Depot wasn't the one contracting for the property. They had, call it a straw man or a third party or any entity. And as far as the property owners that were selling new, they were just selling to somebody that wanted to buy their property. They didn't know there was an assemblage going on. Pretty clearly, if they knew there was, I mean, I think everybody got more than a fair price. But the one guy that, if everybody held out for $750,000 on 14 parcels, it never happened. And if it hadn't happened, I mean, there was always a fear that it wouldn't happen, that you couldn't get the last piece. But what they were paying for the parcels and what we've been able to assemble, at that point, let's just say that there was, I'd pick a number, $7 or $8 million or $9 or $10 million that was invested in it. They knew worst case, if they couldn't get it all done and just had to dump it, that maybe they could either get their money back or maybe they lost 10 or 20% on a fire sale to dump it, but they took a shot at a store that probably does, I don't know what that store does, $100 million in sales or something like that. Yes.
How did you start the site selection? Did they do the site selection process, or was it, I mean?
Initially, they would come to us, I mean, the way that deal happened, they came and they said, we want a location as close to downtown Fort Lauderdale as it could get. This is way before everything that's happened in downtown Fort Lauderdale. So today it looks like they really knew what they were doing, right? Because you're at an entrance to Fort Lauderdale. And you could never assemble that again. You know, probably the only big parcel that will come into play is where the Sears currently is going downtown. And with Sears in as much trouble as they are, but the Sears property, Sears has a leasehold interest, so I'm sure you've covered that. So Sears doesn't own that property. They don't own the land. The land is owned by a developer out of Miami that owns, you know,
Miami Heat.
Yeah, he owns a piece of the Miami Heat. He owns a great deal of property down in North Miami. He owns a lot of property in Hollandale. So he's sitting in the catbird seat because at the end of the day, when Sears goes when Sears goes down or decides to close that store, he's got a parcel that he's been trying to get to forever. When I first did that Home Depot deal at Home Depot, we went and we looked at all the locations that were potentially available or that could be assembled, and that was one of them. And that guy at the time would have loved to have done Home Depot, gotten rid of Sears and done the Home Depot deal, and I would too, because he said, if you can get that, for one, he wanted me to solve this problem, which was getting rid of Sears, and for two, he offered me a fee that that was a ridiculously large fee, but in order to get there, it meant moving mountains, which we couldn't move at the time. So we probably looked within a mile radius of there, what could potentially be done at the time. There were a couple of big car dealerships, now what was the former King Oldsmobile dealership, which was 10 or 12 acres, so it could have gone there, it could have gone on the Sears, it ultimately went where it was. But there weren't very many places that it could go where we could assemble enough land to do it.
Was there existing, there was the motorcycle.
There was all kinds of existing, there was, none of you are old enough to know, and not even Gloria is probably old enough to know, but there was a circus car lot there, so there was right on the corner. I mean, it was literally called the circus. There was some big monument that was right on the corner. It would be interesting, and I don't know that we have them. I mean, back when today you'd pull up an aerial of this stuff, and you could actually probably go back and get an aerial of the time that was done and see what was actually there.
Fort Lauderdale city limits?
What's that?
Is it in Fort Lauderdale city limits?
Yes.
Yeah, we can put that.
So at some point in time, it would be interesting if you wanted to just, it's an interesting case study just because it had a lot of moving parts. It was with a big player. The city of Fort Lauderdale, this whole corner was just dilapidated, so the city was thrilled to see it all come down. But there were a lot of moving parts to it. At the end of the game, for a relatively nice looking building, and if you actually drive by that building on Sunrise Boulevard, you'll see that on the face of the building, on the south side of that building, they kind of made it all look a little bit like storefronts. It's just not a solid wall, and that's something else that the city wanted. They wanted it to look aesthetically pleasing. So.
Actually, I have two questions. So when you have like a use looking for a site like Home Depot, Dollar Tree, do they contact you every single time they want to do something, or do they have like a standard form that we're interested in this type of location wherever in South Florida?
So the quick answer to that is, in the case of Dollar Tree, as Chris put it before, I mean, when we're talking to our clients, we like to be, we're part of their team. We try to get rid of the broker's title as quick as we can, because when you're a broker, there's just a connotation that you're a broker, you're a car salesman, or you're whatever. So we want to be part of whoever team it is. If we're working for the landlord, it's like we're in-house. They're not paying us until we do a deal, but we're part of the team. And in the case of Dollar Tree, our guys in the office are on the phone with Dollar Tree every day. So the Dollar Tree is an ongoing, they've got 150 stores, they want to put as many stores in the South Florida market as they can, so that's ongoing. In the case of Home Depot, once they really stopped building new stores, then we started looking for where's the value in their existing stores. So we did an analysis a couple of years ago. We looked at all of their stores in South Florida to determine whether or not they could peel away an out parcel. Is there an opportunity? They have enough parking in the parking lot where they could create an out parcel and pull $1 million or $2 million out of the property. In the case of PJ Superstore, PJ Superstore was started by one of the original founders of Home Depot, as it happens. There are now 25 or 30 of them across the country. And maybe 6 months ago, we sold them the former Toys R Us location in Plantation. And they're not trying to do 150 stores a year. They're trying to ramp up 5 or 10 stores across the country. So we're currently looking in North Miami, Hollandale for another store, but it's not like we're brokers. to make a fee, so the quicker a client does a deal, the better. But so we've spent a lot of time, we just keep them informed as to what's in that market, but there's no urgency to get the next deal done down there. If a great deal came along, like the deal he was talking about up, right, where all of a sudden in Orlando, there's an opportunity because a tenant moves out and somebody's been looking for a box there, and we know it's coming, we might say, look, this is your only opportunity, you better do it now. I know you really would rather do it in about a year, but this may be the only opportunity. Sometimes that sense of urgency helps to get a deal done.
And when you do the assemblage, is your firm getting paid on each individual piece that you assemble, or is it like a flat overall fee?
In that particular case, there were some of the property owners that were willing to pay a brokerage fee on their sale, and there were some other guys that said, we don't really want to sell, and if we do sell, we don't want to pay a brokerage fee. So in that particular case, you know, at least in that arrangement, Home Depot covered us on those parcels where someone didn't want to pay us a fee. So we were either got paid by the owner of the property or got covered by Home Depot. And certainly there are times on a deal like that where we might work on a flat fee if they said, you got to go put this whole thing together, and we just establish what a flat fee would be.
So
Yep.
curious, back to the Home Depot one, like from the brokerage angle, right? Obviously you're doing buyer rep, you know, I'm just trying to imagine, is it because, did they use one entity, one third-party entity, or what?
You mean in the name of the buying entity? I think it was probably just one name.
Okay.
You know, most of these people, I mean, most of these properties that were part of the summer, these owners were so disconnected from each other, they were just happy to sell and get a payday. I don't think it really got to the last couple where people said, man, there's something going on here. We just saw, but, you know, and I don't think anybody owned two properties, because if we had bought one and then they had the last piece of the puzzle, like the guys that did, right? So it just never came to that. And I think a lot of times it would. I mean, if you're down in Flagler Village right now, where there's so much focus, there's so much focus from developers down there that everybody that owns a parcel is getting their door knocked on 10 to 15 or 20 times a week. So they know what's going on there, and nothing is going to slip through the cracks. No property is going to go undervalued down there. You know, it was a big difference between up here where you know, there wasn't another big box looking in the market. It didn't really matter to people. They just didn't really see it coming. And at the same time, I think everybody got more than a fair price, because Home Depot, whatever it took to get them bought, they did.
Did you guys do the Doors Market on Mount Building?
We didn't do the Doors, but we've done Doors as market deals, but we didn't do that deal.
Okay.
Yes.
You're talking about like North Miami and Hallandale Beach for like a big box store like that. In terms of, I know there's a lot of opportunity zones there right now, and I was talking to a tax law lawyer about it this week, and he said it's really not that great of a thing. Have you seen a lot of property owners kind of being extra stubborn about it because of that?
The answer is I haven't. I mean, we have spent, right, so that's the big buzzword.
Yeah.
I have tried to pay as much attention as anybody has to that. I've said on seminars, we've been in lawyers' offices, accountants' offices, everybody's putting on seminars about this thing. I think there's still, and there's a huge amount of money sitting on the sideline to try to jump into these deals. I haven't really seen too many deals, and she could probably tell you better because they're really on the development side of the, but at the moment, I think there's still a lot of unknowns. I think every deal needs to stand on its own. And if it happens to be in an opportunity zone where you get that little extra something, but anybody that's going into an opportunity zone to make the deal work because it's in an opportunity zone, that's dangerous.
Right.
That's dangerous. I think that, if you've got a deal that makes sense,
There's a
and
lot
that
of
little
interest.
extra tweaking is what really, and then you get the extra push, like Andrew was talking about before, right? Because you've got a little market knowledge. And there's a lot of nuances, so it sounds like you paid attention, there's a lot of nuances to that deal. You know, there's an enormous amount of money sitting there, but if you go in there and you buy a property, you have to spend a certain amount of money improving a property.
Right.
There's still some timelines you gotta meet, and the clock is still running, because the longer it takes you to get into a deal, the benefits have, at least at the moment, even though everybody expects they may get extended, there's still a termination point on them at this point.
Right.
So, you know, do you wanna speak to that a
No,
little
I would
bit?
say that is the buzzword right now, everybody's interested, all the legal firms and CPA firms are doing, seminars on that. We were at one not too long ago. It's interesting, it's intriguing, but at the end of the day, the real estate deal has to make sense, and if it does, and you're in an opportunity zone, great, that's a bonus. But I don't think anybody's rushing to do a deal because it's in a zone.
Right.
And it's still very early at this point, we're not seeing deals
Yeah,
done yet.
one thing we are seeing is that real estate prices, at least some brokers are trying to bring up the prices because of the
25%,
opportunity zones.
yeah.
And that's making it a little bit harder to pencil out and putting false expectations on the property owners right now.
Right.
There are a couple of things.
If you're increasing the price on the savings, that's what would motivate people to do it. When
Yeah.
you increase the price, they're just like, okay, we'll go do it another, you know, there's no point to do it if they're gonna take that.
So what we're seeing different in our world, at least for the last 6 months, is that if the property's in an opportunity zone, when you see a flyer like we put out, opportunity, it's in an opportunity zone, right? At the end of the day, and then every once in a while, you'll see where the broker or the marketing company tries to take a stab at showing what the benefit of that will be. But at the end of the day, you know, and the other nuance is that in order to really get into a deal, it takes a long time on these deals. The deal that Andrew did, it was pretty specific. Here's the income. He did his homework, right? These 30 days, I mean, whatever, how much time they spent before they actually put up their offer and got under contract. He probably, how many, did you spend a couple months looking at that deal before you actually had to put your bid in?
Well, for 30 days.
Okay, so 30 days before they even put their bid in, right? In these opportunity zones where it's a development deal, and if you actually have to spend 50% of whatever not the value of the land, whatever the building is on there, you gotta spend 50% more. So that means at some point in time, you gotta get a contract. First, you gotta figure out what it is that you're gonna do to spend 50% more. Then you gotta go get it bid, right? So all of those things take a lot of time, and we're in a hot market right now, so every seller that has a piece of property wants you to contract for the property and close on the property in 30, 60, 90 days. It doesn't begin to give you the time that you really need to go do all this kind of homework. This kind of homework, probably takes 6 to 9 months to get to that piece. And then if you've actually bought the property and you've got to go pull a building permit to do the work that you're required to do to meet that, it takes you, we're working on a deal right now and a guy only wants to do a facade of the building. And he's being told that it's going to take him, and this is without any certainty, but at least 4 to 6 months to get a building permit to do the work.
In Fort Lauderdale?
In Fort Lauderdale. So
I just
that,
looked
if that's
online.
just to get a building permit,
Yeah.
and the guy's going to have to close on the property before he knows for sure he can get a building permit,
Yeah.
which means he's going to have to spend $5 million, which is giving him a lot of heartburn, and my best guess is he won't do it. But if he does do it, it takes him 4 to 6 months. This is a property that's to be re-tenanted. There's only one tenant in the property, and you need the 3 tenants to make it go. And none of those tenants are going to commit until they actually see the facade. They're not going to commit based on a picture that he's doing.
Right.
They might commit to a letter of intent, but they're certainly not going to. They're not going to commit to a lease until he knows. So the timelines associated with some of these development deals, which is why looking at an existing product that you can analyze that has cash flow, right, where you don't have to spend 12 to 18 months to build it from the ground up, is pretty attractive.
Yeah. Attractive. I mean, the ultimate goal too, like I asked everybody when I got into business, what's your biggest regret? And every one of them said not owning real estate. All these people do brokerage deals, they get paid fees, and they make $600,000 a year. They don't put money into real estate deals. So like your goal at the end of the day is no matter where you are in the business, find a way into ownership. Like my first deal, I brought the buyer, I brought the property to the table, I brought the tenant, and I was given 20% equity in the deal, and that's what we're putting on the market right now. So figure out a way to get ownership, create your value, get sweat equity if you don't have money, raise the capital, like figure out a way to do it, but your overall goal should be to have your own real estate portfolio. Because at the end of the day, you can tell everybody you did these deals, but you'd be rather saying like, oh, and I still own that site that I did 25 years ago.
Do you want to talk about that first deal? Because I'm waiting for my first deal.
So that deal was like with a Dutch pot. It's just a local Jamaican restaurant which came from a landlord representation account. And basically, I went to them and said, would you guys lease this property? And they said yes. And it was only for lease. And I said, well, would you guys want to buy it? And it wasn't for sale. And they said no. And I said, well, can we buy it and lease it to you? And they said, yeah, sure, whatever. You know, so I was like, okay. So then I went to the guy that was leasing the building, and I said, they said they would only do the deal if you would sell it. And they said, well, it's not really for sale. I go, well, then they won't do the deal. And he had nothing else going, so he said, okay, well, bring us an offer, bring us a purchase price. So we got a purchase price. My dad and I put it under contract. We had no money to do the deal. We had no idea really what we were doing, so we went to another partner who we started the due diligence process with, and he ended up we went down that road a little bit. We started spending a little bit of money. He goes, oh, this isn't for me. This isn't the type of tenant. This isn't what I, you know. So he bailed on us. And then we had some other people that were pretty sophisticated that we felt we got them on our team to get the deal done. They all said no. And then because of a meeting that we had out in Vegas with one of our attorneys, they were just closing on where the REE project is in the Audi dealership in Fort Lauderdale, and they had some money they wanted at 1031. Our money was going hard the next day. I got on the phone with them, and they're like, well, what do you need? And I said, well, we need $1 million. And they go, okay, Carl, send them over the $1 million. So they sent us the money in cash. We were able to close on the property, or the money went hard the next day. And that happened to be all based kind of like on a handshake, and said, well, I'll do the right thing. And so we were able to close on the deal. We had, mind you, that we went to that, we didn't just say this is the deal. We had done the due diligence, we had done the phase 1. We knew there was no problems, we knew what it was going to cost to redevelop the property, and we had a signed lease from the tenant contingent upon closing on the property. So there was no like risk of closing on it and then not doing the deal. We had already had a signed lease that said, if you guys buy the property, we are responsible for a 15-year lease. So that also helps when going to get financing. You want to take, there's obviously going to be an inherent risk in any deal you do, but you want to take as much of the risk as possible. So having a signed lease, or having conversations like he did with tenants before purchasing the property, saying, hey, if we buy this thing, are you going to do this deal? That's like crucial. So in that scenario, it was kind of a home run for them, and now we have it on the market, and we'll make it. We had $1 million into it. We have it on the market. We're selling right now for $2 million. So we're doubling our money, and I'm telling everybody that turned us down to do the deal how successful the project is going. So the next time they want to partner with you, and the more of those successful deals, that's why a company like Styles, that's why people, when Styles brings you a deal, you do the deal, because you see their track record of success. So that's your goal, is to be someone like Terry was a huge, their company is basically our biggest competitor in the market, and they've stolen some of our better talent that we've had in our company, but they're still somebody that you respect because they're very good at their job. And somebody like Terry, who's not with us anymore, but founded this program here and had a huge impact on South Florida's real estate industry. And they're your competitors, but they're also your friends too. They're also the ones that will tell you about a site that, hey, just so you know, we didn't do this development, but this is kind of the information, or so. Even though they're your competitors, they also might give you the information that makes you look really, really good to your clients. So you need to kind of keep everybody on your team. So that's kind of how that deal went down. But yeah, there's always a way to get into a deal. If you bring something to the table somebody else doesn't have, you don't necessarily have to have the money. You need to have the relationship with the money. The money is so easy, is the easiest part. There's so much money. When you get into the business, you're going to find that people like Andrew just die. They have $10, $100 million. There's all these groups. There's so much money out there. What they want is a deal. You know, how can you make them, like on that deal that we brought to the table to our partners, they could give me 20% because it was still a 14% return, because we were buying a vacant building that we filled day one with a tenant. So there's automatic cash flow that wasn't, you know, that wasn't what the property was being valued on. So yeah.
Do you guys get a booth at ICSC, or you just kind of like call?
So it
guys
depends.
up
So
ahead of time?
yeah, so yeah, no, we definitely get a booth, especially like the local ICSCs, and you guys should all go to that because it's only $50, and that's a good place. And when you're a student, you can get all the information in the world. Like actually, when I was in this program, and we were I did not understand performance or anything. Gloria brought me to her office. That's how I really met Gloria, because she knew my dad, and she's like, oh, okay. She heard I was going through the program, and you know, she took like 4 hours and walked me through this whole performa. And little did I know at the time, like, if I had a photographic memory, like the information she was sharing with me was like, you know, real live, crucial data that is like, that you wouldn't tell your competitor, you know? And she just gave me an open book to everything. But that's what will happen when you're a student. Like knock on people's doors now, because if you say, oh, I'm an alumni of, I'm looking for a job, well now you're just like every other unemployed person. You know, you need to go, you go when you're a student and ask, and they want to see that initiative, and that's how you'll get them to open doors for you. And they'll introduce you to people, go to the ICSC shows.
Not only that, but I think people will tell you more as a student.
Way more, yeah.
They recognize that you're not really competition, they're not going to use that information. Oh, so I'm going to buy that site because they said this. Instead, they see it as
You're mentoring someone.
I'm helping
Yes,
someone.
you're
I'm
helping.
mentoring someone. So.
Yeah. We have seen it with competitions. We have seen it with class projects, where I try to manage a little bit the access to certain people. Like, don't have 30 students call up the planning director of a municipality. Funnel that a little bit. But we had students competition, students teamwork, where it was amazing what kind of detailed information the students were able to collect with 5 or 6 phone calls or a lunch or something like this, versus if you are actually running your own LLC, your own company, there's no way unless you have met them before.
Yeah, people want to hear from you. Like, you know, my dad said when I walked in, let's see what we can peel out and hire. You know, it's like people are always looking for new talent. There's always like a position, you know, available somewhere potentially. Somebody's job is always up for grabs. So showing somebody that you have initiative and that you know, have interest in something, it goes a long way, a lot further than you think. Or they might know somebody. I mean, you know, people are always making shifts in the industry, and you just never know who can put you in contact with somebody. You never know. I mean, you just don't know whose relationships people have.
So Dr. Werzer, I emailed you a flyer.
It's loaded up.
Great, I wanted to, Aldo and I here are here today to talk about a ground-up hotel development, but before we jump into that, I wanted to show a flyer of a retail property that everybody at this table has been involved with, and it goes to what we've been talking about, how important a network is, and you end up dealing with the same people over and over again, maybe different companies, but the same individuals. So this is a firm that CREC was formerly involved with. It's just north of Broward Boulevard, fronting Powerline Road. And currently the Bill's company is leasing a landlord rep for us. And we've had 2 new leases, and we have an LOI now that we're just finishing up. So it's an example, you know, it's an example of how we all work together. I remember when we acquired it, Aldo was involved in the acquisition of that property and doing all the due diligence. A couple of months later, I remember calling you, Andrew. We had a leasing question. You referred me to the leasing director who had done the deal. A couple of months after that, I was looking for a new leasing company. I knew this was in Bill's wheelhouse. You guys are 10 minutes from the property, know the market very well. So you're going to be doing deals with colleagues and competitors, and it's just the same group of people. Reputation is very important. Always remember that, because you will bump into the same people maybe a year later or maybe 10 years later, but it is very important. So I just wanted to show that to you guys. And
that you need each other, because that's where your knowledge comes from, and that's where your power comes from. That's what creates you value to a client, is having knowledge, and the only way to know what a tenant is actually paying is being able to call the owner of the property. you know, and being able to ask.
Right.
And them telling you, and you knowing that it's the truth. Is there somebody you played golf with or had a cocktail with, or you know their wife and kids? Like, take notes, you know, and say, hey, when you call them back, hey, how's little Johnny doing, you know?
Is there a conflict of interest between being a tenant rep and a landlord rep? And you have to disclose that, if you want to talk.
Not really, no.
I think
No,
it's a benefit.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit.
One of the considerations in hiring Bill's company was they have tenant relationships. So, for example, Dollar Tree just recently toured the area. It wasn't a fit for us. We couldn't give them what they wanted, but the fact that they represent Dollar Tree is what put our property on the tour. So for me, it's a benefit.
Yeah, and then we also know who's like coming into a market. So we might do tenant representation and try and do something in an area. But because we own a shopping center or represent a shopping center, there's people calling on it. All the other tenant rep guys are calling, so you know who's looking in the market. You know everything going on, and you know. Then you can also take that tenant if they're not represented and say, oh, so you're looking in the market. How many square feet are you looking for? Oh, well, you know, is there anyone representing you? No. Oh, well, have you looked at this 5,000 square feet up the street? I can help you get into there. I know the owner. Yeah, you can help me represent. So now you can take that landlord assignment and now turn it into a tenant rep assignment. So don't be afraid to ask the questions and understand the different ways that you can make money. Like us taking that little leasing thing for 2J's. Now we're selling the building for $6 million and making 10 times more the fee that we were going to make. Potentially, hopefully.
Yeah, I would say on one of our best deals that we've ever done, we were all three. We were the buyer, the tenant rep, and the landlord rep. We got the deal because we were a tenant rep of Total Wine. We knew where they wanted to be. So we went to the buyer, or to the seller on an off-market deal, knew how much we could pay for the deal because we had Total Wine in our back pocket. We bought the deal, put them in there, and then in addition to that, we also became the landlord reps since we owned it. And then we ended up bringing in some of our other tenant rep assignments. So I think being both the landlord rep and the tenant rep really helps.
It widens your knowledge base, which gives you a competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's definitely better to start with landlord work than tenant rep because you learn like a specific market. So you'll know everything going on within like 5 miles as opposed to having to know all of the Tri-County markets. But like that deal with the Dutch part I did, I got paid on the sale, I got paid a leasing fee for representing the tenant, and now I'm going to get paid on the other end of it too, and on equity. So there's like when we were doing our performance here, it was always about how can you add more fees to be bringing in more money into your firm, whether it's from a management fee or acquisition fee or whatever. So there's all kinds of different ways to get the fees out that are built into the deals. So you might as well try to make those fees.
And from a broker standpoint, and my husband is a broker, and I know many brokers, so pick your clients carefully. That's where your reputation comes in. If you're a landlord who doesn't treat brokers well, who doesn't pay the commission on time, or gets to the end and changes the commission structure, that's a red flag. You probably don't want to be dealing with that landlord.
Yeah, we won't bring that guy again. Like
Exactly.
if we know they're not going to pay us and like we're driving through the market, then that building doesn't have space available. You know, for real though. You know, and sometimes they'll give you incentives to do. I mean, you obviously are going to do what's in the best interest of your tenant. And there's times where I've spent for this company called Cycleward, I spent 6 months trying to find them a site, and at the end of the day, they did a deal somewhere that was in their best interest, where I got a $150 gift card to Capital Grill. You know, but that was for their success, and when you tell them, you know, it's like I did the deal for Yoga Joint. I said they did this deal in downtown Fort Lauderdale, the Del Mar, and I was trying to relocate them on 17th Street, and I said just do what's in your best interest if that's where you want to be. And so they knew that I didn't try to do something for my fee. The next deal, they teed up for me. I didn't have to do a single thing, and they went to the landlord and said, Chris represents us, you have to pay him a fee. And I didn't have to do anything, but because I did what was right in their best interest, and that's the same thing with like the Dutch pot, they will still be so loyal to you, because they don't know anything about real estate. So when they trust you, they'll really like put their trust in you, and they'll protect you. And that's what you want, is like exclusive representation. You don't want somebody that says, oh, we're looking in the market, if you can find us something, send it over. That's not who you want to work with. You want to work with the guy that says, we're only gonna use you, and, you know, cause like, I mean, I've have my competitors that I've brought my tenant to the site, somebody that worked for our company, you know, basically bring them, they, however it happens, ends up sending a site to my tenant. They could have easily have just done the deal and cut me out of it, but instead my tenant forwards it and says, look into this. So you want that loyalty where they make sure you're protected on the deal, because you can do a lot of work and then find yourself, the tenant might have liked the Home Depot. They might only do one deal in the market for a year or two, so you do all this work and then you don't get paid. And $100,000, $200,000 is a big fee. It might be your only deal of the year. So you have to make sure you're working with people that are loyal. You can get them to sign contracts, but I mean, at the end of the day, a handshake and somebody's word is way more valuable than any piece of paper that's all signed.
When you have to look at a contract, that's where you have a problem.
Yeah.
That's where you have a problem.
Yeah, you want somebody that's loyal to you and that, you know, and vice versa. Because they're also giving you a ton of information too. I mean, they're giving all their sales, their personal information, their bank account. I mean, you know everything about them. So.
What do you think are the next few trends in the market? Land markets is closing, availability of land, we hear from everyone, it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Disposition of Home Depot. What are the next trends you think that could be a niche maybe for students here? As in, hey, watch out, this is going to be a hot thing, or could be something.
The marijuana industry is obviously huge, you know, but that's only going to be a small piece and it will max out eventually, but that's something that we're seeing shake up other markets. Like Colorado, it completely revitalized their industrial market and changed the whole industrial market, so looking in forefront of things like that and understanding. But yeah, no, density is the name of the game though, right? I mean, that's what creates value is when you can, like in a market like Orlando, a neighborhood gets all built up and then they go build another real estate node and they'll say, oh, we'll just like Lake Nona, they just went to the middle of nowhere and just started building all this stuff. So you want to be in a market like Miami, where you have the ocean and the Everglades and there is no more going this way and there's no more going this way. Like that's what makes Manhattan so successful, is that there's nowhere to go. I mean, so you can only go vertical. And that's what creates, you know, the value, is that there's not other land available. That's what you want.
I think the trend, and we've been seeing it, is mixed-use infill projects, trying to cram as much as you can onto a smaller piece of land, repurposing buildings. I actually just came back from Indiana. We have a shopping center up there, and the economic development director toured me in the downtown area, and a private developer is taking a section of what was the original downtown, so it has these very old brick buildings, and they're being repurposed with retail and residential on top. So cities are getting creative with a limited amount of land.
I'm also seeing a trend along Oakland Park. Is that the kind of new and upcoming, like sort of a conversion from like, you know, not very up and coming, but now potential to be up and coming?
So a market like Oakland Park or like Delray or Pompano, sometimes it comes like an area like that is like the last place that you would want to go and spend your weekend. They might hire what's called a CRA, which is what is Stanford Community Redevelopment Association, right? Agency. So the city might say, okay, we'll give $3 million to this, and they'll hire this company, and this company will go out and have relationships with brokers and landlords and tenants and try to incentivize them to come in and develop into the market. They'll say, hey, if you buy this property, the city's willing to, you know, work with you on zoning. They're willing to allow you to bring in restaurant tenants even though you don't have the parking for it. They'll give each one of your tenants $10,000 towards paint and improvements and things like that. So a market like Oakland Park Boulevard, right, like by like Funky Buddha in that area right there, is part of a CRA where they're pumping in money, hoping that they'll make their money back on the taxes and the resale of the properties in the area. And so there's markets that do those kind of things.
So are you asking about something specific in Oakland Park?
No, I'm just seeing a trend because one of the other speakers that we had a property there. I mean, this is one that's up and coming that we have there. Just what I've seen.
So I would just tell you one of a couple things. So at the corner of Oakland and Federal, and then where the Pure Platinum was, the property the round building that sits at the corner, right? And then there's a little office building next to it, and then Bahama Breeze just opened on Federal. So a developer acquired the round building, the building next to it, and I think that he is a guy that thinks out of the box. So there's a lot of guys that go, here's a couple acre piece of property, I could put a gas station on this property, I could whatever, and I could just go on about my business. In this case, this guy buys these two different corners, and he's gonna do 265 apartments wrapping around the round building, and 18,000 square feet of retail on the ground floor. And then he's going over to the Pure Platinum property, which 9 out of 10 developers would have looked at buying and said, man, if I put a Wawa there, or I do this, or I do that, I could get great cash flow and keep going. This guy's building 165 apartments and 30,000 feet of retail. Now, both projects are approved by the city. I think he's trying to get them financed. Everybody wonders whether is there a market for 450 apartments right there. But there's a guy that thinks completely, or I'd say completely differently than almost everybody else that would have looked at those sites. He sees something that nobody else saw. Is he right or wrong? Only time will tell. And then the old Kmart on Oakland Park Boulevard, which Walmart was going to build on, and went through a couple-year tussle with the city, where both sides had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. They've recently put that property in the market, and at least for the moment have decided after all of that maybe they won't sell. Somebody will come along and pay them money. Maybe they don't want to be located in the city. So there's a lot of moving parts. You never know how they're going to go. There are times that guys in my office, when I say you really should focus on Federal Highway from Commercial Boulevard to the airport because there's so much going on there, they think everything's been picked over. And then in the next 12 months, 20 properties have traded hands that you went, I didn't think that property would ever come to the market. Or a guy bought something and then decides what he had in mind doesn't work and he's going to flip it or sell it or trade it or whatever. And just as on a complete aside, when you start going to all of these various networking events that you're going to go to, you're going to meet so many people that you can't keep track of it. Whenever you take somebody's business card, write in the back of that business card where you met that person and who might have introduced you. Because if you get a card and you go, I have no idea, but you know what? But you know, Gloria introduced me, and I need to get to that guy. So I've met Gloria at this class a couple times. I could call Gloria back and see if she can make the introduction again. Or when you call the guy back, I met you through Gloria. I can tell you, I try to do that, and when I don't do it, you pay for it because you go to a convention, you pick up 50 cards or 100 cards at a clip. And a lot of people are just with somebody and everybody exchanges cards, but the people that you might really want to know, it's nearly impossible to keep track of it. So write in the back of the card a little note to yourself that helps you remember what it was that you talked about and who introduced you and where you got the card, what event you got the card at. You'll be thrilled at the end of the day when you pick that card up that you can associate that name with something.
And on that note, follow up with those people that you're really showing interest, to demonstrate that you're really showing interest, not just collecting contact numbers. So I'm part of the judges at Shark Cage, which is the entrepreneurial specialty program here we have in the university. And the kids are pitching small businesses here on campus, business ideas. And I'm one of the guys who tells them, hey, great or not great. And the reason why I bring this up is, first of all, I'm doing this in 3 years now. Yesterday I gave the first 100% points on one of the proposals, which was really great. It's student businesses on campus for students. Yeah? So they can't go out and make a big internet firm or something. However, they are amazing when it comes to networking. Bob Moss gave a speech a few weeks ago, and one of those kids introduced herself to Bob, thanked him for being here and giving the speech, and about a week later they had lunch together. Yeah? As a follow-up, and have about an hour, 90-minute conversation, one-on-one with another leader in the industry, that is a connection and a memory you can build on the next time when you're looking for a job or an internship or advice. And then say, hey, remember me? You want to stay in contact. Same thing with our mentoring program. Do more than just that once in a quarter coffee break. Yeah? Don't annoy them too much with daily phone calls, but create this organic relationship with those mentors. Yeah? Even if you change continents for work like I did, I still have contacts with my mentors from 20 years ago and those who yelled at me 5 days ago because I haven't called them for a year. It works for all directions, so keep that in mind.
One of the things that I make sure I do is either to have coffee or lunch or drinks at least a few times a week with people within the industry, whether it's with competition of another guy who does acquisitions or a leasing guy or another owner or whatever it is, just because one, you create friendship, but not only beyond that, you also create knowledge. You may gain something that he's building something on this corner, so no one, I'm not gonna try and go after the same one, but know what? Since the Publix is being built here, maybe I should go on this side here and maybe I could build something there. Or if I speak with Chris and he's looking for the Dollar Tree stores in Orlando and I see a land site that may be great, maybe I could put it under contract. So I think it's all about knowledge and networking, and while it may not help you now, it may help you in a year or it might help you in 10 years.
Or they might remember you when you call them and you're with a tenant and they stop and give you the information. Or they're going to try to take them out of the business atmosphere. Like, golf is awesome because you're 4 hours alone with them. You see how they react to good shots, bad shots. It's hard to stay fake for 4 hours straight and after a few cocktails, or go on the boat or do something outside of the office so you can really get to know that person, and it changes from a business relationship to like more of a personal relationship where you start to feel like you can trust each other. That's definitely crucial. That's why the ICSC shows are good. You make your relationship at the bar until midnight when you're sitting there, because that's when, you know, if everybody's drinking, like drink Coca-Cola and they're just like, oh, it's a Jack and Coke, but like let them all get drunk and then ask the questions and get the information. That's when the information really starts coming out about deals and what people are really, that's when you can really ask, what is this tenant really paying? And they might feel more in that environment to be more honest with you than they would in a business environment.
So you're telling my students right now that you're benchmarking your business deals based on the amount of gin and tonic or rum and coke.
But you stay sober and let them drink. You buy them and drink. So this is like this app I started recently using, and you should probably download it. It's like $10 a month, but it is like, it's really amazing. It's called Landglide, and it basically is, it links like all of the property appraisal websites to this app. So you could be in Manhattan or you could be California. Everywhere I've traveled recently, I've been using this app, and you can use it. It will follow you as you're driving in the market. But let's say you were looking at a shopping center, you're like, oh, I wonder if the shopping center owner also owns the out parcel, if I can buy that out parcel and do my Dutch pot there. So it will allow you to pull it up immediately, see the boundary lines, see what they own and what they don't own, and then go right to the owner and potentially from there link and call that person right while you're sitting at the site. So it's a really cool app, especially if you're like in the industry. You should definitely
My favorite app. It's my new favorite app. It just gave me Nova Southeastern just
yeah, it'll tell you the value of it and everything. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool.
While we're talking about apps, I guess another website that's really good is a website called Sites USA.
Yeah.
And you can basically do a void analysis. So whether you're a leasing agent or you're a shopping center owner, I can type in a property. I can say where is the nearest Home Depot, where is the nearest Hobby Lobby, and then in separate it'll show you who's missing from that market. I can do a 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile. So if I have a box and I could say who's not here, it'll say Hobby Lobby's not here, Bed Bath and Beyond isn't here, so that then I know who to go after and then who to.
So it actually tells you the franchises rather than leakage factors, as in what kind of product branch is missing. Ah, interesting. Because we've done this in a GS class. I introduced the students to tools like Business Analyst Online, where you can do all these market reports, in particular on the retail side. And they don't show necessarily the name of the brand, but they say automotive parts as an example, and see what was done in sales and predictions of sales for the next 5-10 years.
So this website, I think it's once or twice a year, they go through every major retailer's website, and they'll write down every address and put it into their system. And that way they know where every single larger retailer is. They're not gonna have maybe your smaller 1,000-footers, but it's more for the big ones.
Would you like to take over?
I sure would, yes.
So is my understanding that the information you're going to share is confidential?
Yes, it is.
It's a live deal, yeah.
So first of all, a little bit